Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted and honored that you're here. We are in Branson, Missouri, getting some grandbaby time and son and daughter-in-law time, and appreciate the opportunity to continue this conversation about this awesome tool of first-century Aramaic forgiveness, and the opportunity to enhance on another level, another step, and taking these tools to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. You know, hello to folks in Hawaii, hello to Australia, Sweden, Poland, and I guess, you know, pretty much every one of the 50 states. So delighted that you're here. And Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
The hands that are up are left over from Dr. Tim, and no, it's quiet in the chat room.
Okay, well then, what I wanted to start with today, and I'm going to have to find the page again, it's changed, is, give me 1 second here. We talked last week about the song Madness with Alanis Morissette. And here obviously is a young lady who has done her work, or I actually am not sure whether she is the writer of that song. No, written by Guy Sigsworth. Actually, Guy Sigsworth and Alanis Morissette. So one or both of those folks have clearly done their work. And the song has come up a couple of times since I mentioned it, and I just thought I would go over the words of it because it is so, I mean, it's 100% somebody who's sat through more than one intensive and been willing to do their work. And the brain cells just in listening or investigating the words of the song will, I think, enhance everybody's process. So I'm going to just go through the words of the song Madness. And if you go on YouTube and do a search, Alanis Morissette, Madness is like as spot on to this work as you could possibly get. Melody line's great. She sings it awesome. You know, the young lady's got an awesome voice. But here's how she starts the song out. Madness. I've been most unwilling. The game of denial. I've been most unwilling to see this turmoil of mine. The thought of sitting with it has me paralyzed. Most everyone in the world is paralyzed by looking at their own turmoil, their own internal trauma, what they haven't dealt with in the way of generational patterns. And so one of our objectives here, and excuse me, it's starting to get noisy. I'm sitting outside of the resort we're staying in, so I'm going to step back inside. So most people inhabit the one world universal religion of blame and live in denial. And so here we have Alanis in the first words of this song just opening up to, I don't want to sit with this turmoil of mine. And if I had to look at it, I'm paralyzed. You remember I read the quote from Francois Fenelon from the early 1700s, where he talks about what we're going to have to look at. And there are people who think, oh, well, but I don't have to look at that. Excuse me. If you are a human on earth today, there's turmoil and trauma. Whether if you've lived the most perfect life, you've got genes. And if you look at what's been going on planet Earth for the last 1,000 or 2,000 years, what's in our genes is pretty crazy. So here she is admitting, I don't want to look at this stuff. And then she's speaking about, you know, there's a statement in the culture that says familiarity breeds contempt. No, familiarity does not breed contempt. But when you get close enough to somebody long enough, sooner or later, they're going to start to play off of whatever you've not resolved in your life, and they're going to tend to project it. So the next thought, after she says she doesn't want to look at her own turmoil, and it's paralyzing to think so, she says, with this prolonged exposure to mirror In other words, you're mirroring back to me what I'm in denial of, what I don't want to look at, and averted eyes. How many times have you been in a relationship where you just avert your eyes, you just look the other way in order not to have to deal with it? But prolonged exposure. I've feigned that I've been waiting such mileage for empathizing. So she's feigned, she's being fake, she's phony. And, of course, I have empathy for you because you're the one with the problem. Again, if you remember the one world religion of blame, it's always everybody else's fault. And then she starts to move into admission, letting go of her denial, stepping out of her membership, giving up her membership card in the one world universal religion of blame. She steps into responsibility. Major step in somebody's life. And so the song goes on, and now I see the madness in me is brought out in the presence of you. Now I know the madness lives on when you're not in the room. In other words, oh my God, I thought this was all yours. But it's mine. And virtually everybody on the planet is stuck in that blame game, which means that they are dissociated from their own trauma. The generational trauma is projected and looks like it's in everybody else's field. Someone else is doing it to me. So she's acknowledging, well, the madness came out in your presence, but you left the room, you left the space, and my God, it lives on. It's still going on. And she admits she wants to go back to the one world universal religion of blame. And though I'd love to blame you for all, I've missed these moments of opportunity. In other words, I'm now realizing when my madness comes up in your face, in your space, that's my opportunity because it's what's happening inside of me. And she goes on to say, you simply brought this madness to light, and I should thank you. It's a really nice melody line on that particular line. You simply brought this madness to light, and I should thank you. Oh, thank you. Much thanks for this bird's eye view. Oh, thank you for your most generous triggers. And so there's only one way you can feel madness, and you can't feel anybody else's. You can only feel madness if there's madness in you. And so because we live in a universe of resonance, we're going to pull somebody in who can trigger that resonance into motion and show us our madness. So she's now turned around from, the starting point where I'm unwilling to see my turmoil and even think about it. It's paralyzing. And now she's saying, thank you for being so generous to trigger me. You truly are. Yesterday in denial, dissociation, and projection, you were my enemy. Now you truly are my friend. And then she acknowledges the tools that she's used to stay in denial. I mean, this song covers everything. It's so powerful. It's been all too easy to cross my arms and roll my eyes. Anybody ever done that cross your arm thing about what they did and roll your eyes, oh, look at them? Every time you've ever rolled your eyes, it's been about what's triggered in you. So once again, she goes back to the chorus, and now I see the madness in me is brought out in the presence of you. Now I know the madness lives on when you're not in the room, and though I'd love to blame you for all, I'd miss these moments of opportune. You've simply brought the madness to light, and I should thank you. Oh, thank you. Much thanks for this bird's eye view. Oh, thank you for your most generous triggers. And now she admits if she's going to leave the one world universal religion of blame, she's going to have to do something. Something's going to have to change in her behavior. So what's she going to have to do? That's the next topic in the song, the next line. I'd have to give up knowing. Remember how you knew it was always everybody else's fault and if only they'd change? And you knew you were right? Well, she's admitting here, I'd have to give up knowing and give up being right. You inadvertent hero, you angel in disguise. So time, she's saying, I'm going to leave my devout devotion to blame, and I'm going to give up knowing that it's all everybody else's fault. And I'm going to give up knowing that I'm right about that, and of course it's your fault. So I'd have to give up knowing, give up being right. You inadvertent hero, you angel in disguise. You know, there's a great line in the Course in Miracles that talks about every circumstance, every situation is for a blessing. It's for your highest good. And that's in essence what she's saying here. Every person that we've ever been in frustration or blame about has been a lie of our mind. I've never been frustrated, angry, sad, or disturbed by anyone. But believe me, in my life, I've had plenty of upset and disturbance, sadness, and pain in my life. But it's never been about what my mind's told me about. It's always been about the madness in me. And guess what? Your pain is about the madness in you. Now, if you think you're right and you know it's everybody else's fault, then again and again and again and again, somebody's going to trigger you. So once again, she comes back to the melody line, and now I see the madness in me is brought out in the presence in you. Now I know the madness lives on when you're not in the room. Though I'd love to blame. Pardon me. Though I'd love to blame you for all, I miss these moments of opportune. You've simply brought this madness to light, and I should thank you. Oh, thank you. Much thanks for this bird's eye view. Oh, thank you for your most generous triggers. And that's the song Madness by Alanis Morissette. Thank you, Alanis, for bringing that one into the world. And to Guy Sigsworth. I don't know who Guy is. Obviously pretty enlightened. So that's Alanis Morissette's song, Madness. Great piece of music. Powerful set of lyrics. And combined with what we spoke of yesterday, does that leave anybody with any questions, any thoughts, anything that comes to mind that we can assist and clarify for you with these tools? So, Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
I'm going to see if Susan put her hand up a second time or if it's left over. So I'm going to turn her microphone on. And then we do have a couple questions from Sean in an email.
Okay. Hey there, young lady.
Hi, I didn't put my hand up, but I'm right here. When are you guys going to go home?
We are actually here through the next, we'll leave this area next Tuesday and head back to Bristol. And then we're only in Bristol for 2 or 3 days, and Jeannie's son and daughter-in-law and Aria and Lincoln are all going to be out on the coast doing a vacation out in North Carolina. And so we're back in Bristol for a couple of days. I think 3 days, and then we get in the car and drive to the coast to spend a week with the other set of grandparents, Gabby's parents and us, and Ryan and Gabby. We've all rented a home together, so we're going to be there for a week with them. And then we're back home again to the garden.
Wow. Are you going to run the show while you're out there the way you are now?
Oh, of course, yeah. If we're stuck in travel days, we may play a show, but otherwise, yeah, we'll be continuing as we are here.
Wow.
Like next Monday and Tuesday, we're playing shows because Monday we're going to be loading a U-Haul at Heartland, and Tuesday we're going to be driving. But other than that, we plan on being here.
Okay. Well, it's good of you to come on when you've got a lot going on, you know, with the family and stuff. That's great. We are expecting our Iraqi family moving in tomorrow. So the house is we've gotten rid of some stuff, and we've cleaned out stuff and organized stuff and put doors on where we didn't know they existed. They were stored above our garage, and we need to make open spaces back into rooms. So we found one door and we're creating another one, and it's going to be a different new life. I'll probably be applying tools, but I'm very excited about their coming.
Well, I think it's really awesome that you're setting up a space for these folks to get a new start in a new country, a new life, a new world. That's got to be just, I mean, I'm sure we can't even fathom what they're escaping from that insanity. And so definitely extending blessings in your direction and theirs for new life. And the welcoming of them as our neighbors.
Well, you know, I'm thinking the world needs to go in this direction at least for a while, with rents so high that people just cannot live. And this is a very responsible, lovely little family, single mother with 2 teenage sons. And the sons are eager to work and thrilled to be here. And you know what the older one said? He said, "You have no idea how wonderful it is to be living here. Here we are beating ourselves up because we're in a very hard time climate-wise, but even climate being to me, the biggest issue, but right under it, the strife between our fellow citizens.
Left and right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really amazing. And yet, go ahead. Here, you want to say something, I can tell.
Oh, I had the thought that it'd be nice if we get Alanis Morissette's hand song into the hands of everybody on the left and right with an explanation. That would be pretty cool. We could end a whole lot of turmoil and trauma in the culture. Just, you know, and to me, you know, one of the reasons for what we're doing to make this as available globally as we can is because this is the only thing that's going to put an end to this kind of strife. Otherwise, you know, countries start and they go through a cycle and they destroy themselves. Why? Because people live in denial, dissociation, and projection. And, you know, it's time for that to stop and for us to get on with true human life.
Yeah, that is so true. So, anyway, I'll keep you posted. I'm sure I'll have it doing, as I said, worksheets. But we feel ready for them. Learned a lot from Michael about setting things up for the best for everybody.
Right.
We'll see, though.
Did I understand that they speak Farsi?
No, they speak Arabic, and they were detained in Turkey for 10 years. I might have told you about her before. She left an abusive husband, fled war and an abusive husband when her boys were small, and landed in Turkey and couldn't get out of Turkey for 10 years. What does the mother do? She gets fluent in Turkish and teaches English over there. This is a crackerjack woman.
That's pretty awesome.
And then gets over here and finds a rental she can afford. She got on food stamps. There's one wonderful thing I hope doesn't change. People like her, she said, I could not have fed them unless I had these food stamps. Yeah. And she's got a night job and a day job, and she's exhausted. And she's going to be able to quit one of those jobs, and she's gotten a new job as an interpreter in the 2 languages, and the pay is really good. So she's going to rest and live with us and save and save and save till she can afford a home. She's just so motivated and so mentally well, considering everything. She's an inspiration. And she's only in her 40s, and she's got a 20-year-old son. I think he's 21 or something like that. And I told you, I think he tried to go into the Navy, and they they gave him an honorable discharge because he had such bad PTSD from the fighting in Iraq when he was a little boy. Talk about being able to use the wake-up sheet.
I hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was heartbroken.
Crazy.
He wanted to be part of our military, the Navy. He was proud, and he couldn't graduate, and he was heartbroken. Sweetheart of a guy. It's great.
Maybe he'll be ready for some tools. I've seen many people who've taken these tools up and got rid of their PTS.
Well, he'll be living with us, and I'm looking forward to introducing them to him. Meanwhile, he's already gotten into electrician tech school to get a job. He decided college just wasn't a good idea right now. He may try to go back into the Navy when he's more healed. He said he would love to do that. But in the meantime, it's a 1-year program, and he'll be an electrician.
Nice.
After that. Yeah.
Well, holding
Very
the space
impressive.
for them, and I think it's interesting that we live in a world with such trauma going on, and sadly, a lot of that trauma has to do with what corporate America has done around the world, and a lot of people don't want to take any responsibility for that whatsoever. Let them eat cake and forget it. Where the fact is that in the Aramaic sense, these are our neighbors, and we need to be, cooperative and caring, and there's a very clear scriptural statement about what you do with neighbors, and it's got nothing to do with what the political game is of puking on them and getting rid of them. That's the exact opposite of what the scriptures say to do with the sojourner in our land. So joining you and holding the space for them and extending the tools in their direction.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Yep.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, dear heart, any other thoughts for you?
No, just wish us luck with our refugee center. We now had to form a waiting list because we have about 140 refugees. We can hardly fit them in.
Wow.
And in fact, a ton of Haitians have come in. And I speak a little French, so we've been joking about eating cats and eating your pets.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
So crazy. It's that whole story is literally criminal, and I think needs to be held to criminal accountability. I think it's just disgusting what's been done there.
Yeah, well, a suit has been brought that will probably go nowhere, but it's brought to mind how dangerous it is to play lightly with things like that.
Yeah, maybe there'll be decent minds who'll go, oh, never thought of it that way. Maybe we need to clean up our thinking and our verbiage and our accusations that are just made up of pure nothing but hatred. It's definitely a major opportunity to learn forgiveness all around.
It is. Well, thanks for being there, guys. I know you have another
we appreciate you.
Get off, and I'll be just listening. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you, too.
All right.
Jeannie, too.
Okay.
Love.
All right. Lots of love. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. We actually have 3 questions from Sean. Let me open up the email. One, what is it with a kind of guy that does not have the ability to engage in conversation easily? He can point out errors and is quick to identify what is wrong with things, but he has almost no ability to speak at length. That's the first one.
Well, it sounds like perhaps someone who is stuck in exactly what we were just talking about, and that is PTS. And the culture calls it post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't think it's a disorder. One of the things that happens when people go into fear is that the blood flow to the higher centers of the brain, it's called sympathetic dominance, and the blood flow to the higher centers of the brain are shut down. And when that shuts down, then brain function is shut down. So someone who's in sympathetic dominance, it's considered generally as being fight or flight but actually there are a couple of other F's in there. There's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, which is what happens. I mean, people literally are physiologically incapable of action when the brain is deprived of oxygen and blood flow, as in sympathetic dominance. So it's fight, flight, fright, freeze, and fawning. And that freeze mode is one of them. So you're probably dealing with someone who has a trauma that they have no way of resolving. Hand them the tools and watch them come out of that trauma. And again, it's not a disorder. It's after if one doesn't have the tools and in the middle of a traumatic event, one holds their breath, they're going to lock that energy somewhere into tissue. And it has profound influences throughout the whole structure. Now, if they're not in at a given moment, and it could be something as simple as, their trauma maybe relates to, being 3 years of age and, being a happy-go-lucky kid and wanting to sing a song and getting up and belting their lungs out, and the adults around just laughed at them and scoffed at them. So just thinking about speaking is, just too much for them. So hand them the forgiveness tool, and they'll tend to get out of that. Now, there may be, from what I hear you saying, there may be a component of projection where, if one lives in denial and dissociation of their own pain and trauma, then they'll project that pain and trauma into their brain's image of others. And when they do, they think they can really diagnose everybody else. But what they're looking at is a mirror image of themselves projected into their brain's image of others. So that would be, kind of at least a starting point for a conversation. And what can we do for someone in that posture? Hand them the tools, support them, breathe them. That'd be my take.
Awesome. Okay, their second one is, I know of a 17-year-old who the doctors want to put on Ritalin because he forgets everything and has no desire to retain basic information. He's like he's in a permanent imagination land. He can get short-tempered over little things. There's a holistic doctor who wants to look at his blood, maybe for parasites or fungus. There's another doctor who wants to put chemicals in him. I think it's a physio-spiritual or bio-spirit issue.
Again, it sounds like extreme stress to me. And, what kinds of impact there are from that kind of stress. Yes, someone who's under that kind of stress, it weakens tissue, and tissue can become vulnerable to something like parasites. So that sounds like it would be a wise thing, perhaps, especially if you've got someone who specializes in that arena, that I would assume probably sees other symptoms. It says there might be some parasitic involvement to clean it up. But again, all stress is caused by setting goals. Most of the world doesn't know that. And when we begin to cancel goals, we can reduce stress to acceptable levels and start to bring healing into the mind. So that would be my offering in that regard, is offer the tools of still point breathing, forgiveness, and see where it goes from there.
On his third one.
Two.
Third one is...
Appreciate you, Sean. Keep those questions coming.
We know that viral and bacterial infections can be addressed with zinc, antibiotics, all sorts of other things like ivermectin, etc. But no doctor seems to know how to treat long-standing fungal issues. Are the fungal issues associated in growing by deep-seated anger and rage? Why won't antibiotics clear up fungus? Or is it needed to operate in the body? First thing I thought of was we use a oregano oil, and it is antiviral, antifungal, and antibacterial all. So it's awesome. But if you have
does a better job at leaving the good bacteria intact rather than just wiping things out. And the dietary routine tends, I think, in most cases where people have got fungal infections, to be a big problem. A lot of people who have a problem with fungus are sugar addicts, and they're taking in sugar. And if you deprive someone who's got a fungal infection of sugar, the fungal infection will tend to go down. But man, you eat a spoon of sugar and those things just flare up, crazy time. And so I would offer that probably looking at the dietary aspect of what's going on with that person would be helpful. And any organism that attaches itself to a cell and creates a negative effect can only do so because there's some sort of a deficiency or problem in the cell. They're called reducer organisms. If you went to the jungles in Africa and you watched a pride of lions hunting down, a water buffalo, the lions don't look and go, there's the biggest, fattest, strongest water buffalo in the group. Let's go get that one. That's going to be more food. It's not what they do. You will never find lions taking down that big, tough water buffalo, because reducer organisms don't do that. Reducer organisms go for the weak, helpless, the dying, the diseased. Well, it's no different in the jungle than it is inside of the body. The bacteria, the virus, the fungus, they're reducer organisms. Let's imagine that I've got a 1 acre lawn out here, and I rope off 2 square feet of the lawn. 1 square foot of the lawn is in one corner of the acre, and the other square foot is in the far opposite corner of the acre. I rope them off, and I do a count of bacteria, viruses, bugs, and buzzards on each square foot. Probably, if I do a count on this square foot in this corner and that one way over there, they're going to be pretty similar. However, if I take a dead rabbit, decaying, weakening flesh, and I put it on this square foot, and let's say it's 98.6 degrees, and I leave it there for 2 or 3 days, absolutely 100% of the time, I am absolutely totally, if nothing else changes, I'm absolutely totally guaranteed that I can predict which square foot is going to have the elevated counts of bacteria, viruses, and funguses, reducer organisms, ants, creepy crawly things. I can absolutely guarantee which square foot it's going to be, and it's the one where the decaying tissue is. It's no different inside the body than it is outside. If we are weakening, if we are not providing proper nutrition to the cell, if we have a cell that we load up with the energetic patterns of hostility or fear, if we load the whole organism up with fear and that person goes into sympathetic dominance, and that restricts blood flow to the higher functions of the body, the higher functions of the brain, and all of the things not absolutely necessary to survival, then those things that are cut off from their proper supply of nutrients and blood flow and such, and are cut off from the active presence of love, are like the dead rabbit. They start to decay. And when they start to decay, within the organism itself, there is a cleanup crew. Just like if you go to Africa, there are many reducer organisms, and they're doing their job. They do their jobs inside the body. They do the job outside the body. Killing the reducer organism off is not the solution. Strengthening the cell that is weakened and therefore being digested by the reducer organism is the #1 priority. Strengthen the cell, and the bacteria, the virus, the fungus, the creepy crawly things can't take over the cell. Now, there may be cases if the system has been overrun with reducer organisms, where parallel to strengthening the whole structure of the organism that is seemingly under fire, hand in hand with that might go, yeah, there's an overload of these reduced organisms, so we're going to wipe them out. But be aware that when you wipe those reduced organisms out with a broad spectrum, let's say in the case of a bacterium, with a broad spectrum antibiotic, and you look at that word, antibio, it means anti-life. It is not something you want to engage in. You know, when I first met Jeannie, she worked for a company that made antibiotics. Fortunately, it wasn't too long afterward that they decided, in this case it was fortunate, at least for us, that they decided they were going to go to another country to produce their product, and they offered a buyout. And so Jeannie got a buyout from her job, and she was able to stay home with her son the last year of his high school, the first time in her life, and then we went on the road. And you know, when they tried to sell the company that those antibiotics were made in, they couldn't sell it. They couldn't, pardon me, not the company, but the building, because the building was so toxic from the manufacture of antibiotics that no other business could go in there. And they actually put out a report from the board of directors that what they were going to have to do in order to sell the piece of property, they tried to get another antibiotic manufacturer to come in so that another business could inhabit the building. They couldn't find anybody, so here's what they said in their annual report. We have to reduce the building to the grassy knoll in order to sell the property. That's how toxic antibiotics are. If you do some research, you'll see that people who specialize in and study antibiotics are telling us that the toxic effects of antibiotics are so traumatic to humanity that with 50 years, there will be more people dying of antibiotic-resistant bugs than today are dying of cancer. Now, that's a pretty tragic statement. That's a big tap on the shoulder and big wake-up call. Sadly, the people who will tell us that, you know, the people manufacturing those things are telling us how tragic that is. They have an answer. The answer isn't find healing, get people on proper nutrition, get them to learn forgiveness, get them to function as human beings, to function as love. Their answer is, you see, now what we need to do is get more powerful antibiotics. And guess what? Over 75% of the antibiotics sold in the United States are not sold to treat infections. Do you know what I believe the number's 75% of the antibiotics in the United States are sold for? They're sold to farmers to feed to their animals, because when the animals are taking antibiotics, they get fat faster. You might want to think about, you know, you look at pictures from the beach from 50 years ago, and you didn't see fat people. Pictures from the beach today, and the majority. That might be a clue for us to be looking at. Now, I'm not saying don't ever use an antibiotic. There is no question about it. An antibiotic can save a life. Treatment can be very powerful. But be clear, it can't heal a life. It might save a life. It's going to be healing that's required to heal that life. Treatment and healing are two totally different things. For me, I think any physician who treats only and does not offer healing, or does not know what healing is, or doesn't know that there's a difference between treatment or healing, is engaging in malpractice. And it's a big wake-up call. So that would be my take on it. That would be where I'd be going, is start to look at what needs to be removed from that structure that's creating deterioration of cells, so that cells are attracting reducer organisms. Strengthen those cells, build those cells up, build the tray. You know, if you do some reading, there was a big fight between a guy named Beauchamp and Louis Pasteur. Pasteur discovered this antibiotic that sees, wow, we take this thing and it kills these organisms. And so, sadly, unfortunately, Pasteur won the argument, although he's reputed to have said, and I don't know whether this is fact or not, but Beauchamp was saying the problem is not the attacking organism, exactly what I'm saying right now. The problem is the terrain upon which the attacking organism lands. Strengthen the terrain and the organism can't do damage. Pasteur and Beauchamp fought to the day they died over who was right about whether the terrain theory was correct or the let's kill the bugs theory was correct. It is said, and again, I don't know whether this is fact or not, it may be somebody's fiction, but as I understand it, it's accurate that on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said, Beauchamp was right. Beauchamp was right. You need to build the organism, heal the organism, instead of kill what's attacking it because it's weakened. So great questions, right on track. Does that fit, sweetie? Any other thoughts for you on it? No, cool.
No. And there are no other hands up, and you've got 16 minutes.
So if you're out there in listener land, we've got 16 minutes left to answer questions, or if this has aroused any other thoughts for you. Our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, is 563-999-3581. If you call that number to the show directly, and then if you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel, and we'll have a conversation. So if you're out there in listener land, 563-999-3581. Push 1. How can we support you? What's on your mind? And if we have no hands up, then let's go back to the work we were doing with the Gospel of Thomas that I'd like to add in here that fits. With what we were reading yesterday. And we were talking about the idea of becoming one, male to female, that in fact, if we're seeing correctly, Einstein knew what he was talking about when he said, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. Carl Jung, that to me seemed appropriate to plug in here in the Gospel of Thomas that we've been talking about. And what Carl Jung says, and he's talking to an aspect of each and every one of us that is and can be a healer. So he says, the healer is not just working for a particular patient, but for himself, herself, as well as for his or her own soul. And in so doing, is perhaps laying an infinitesimal grain in the scales of humanity's soul. Small and invisible as this contribution may be, it is yet an opus magnum. In other words, that idea that comes from the Course in Miracles that says when you are healed, you're never healed alone, that as you do your work, you're moving the needle for the whole of humanity because the whole of humanity is in fact one. So we had read number 23 yesterday where Yeshua says, I shall choose you 1 of 1,000 and 2 of 10,000, and they shall stand as a single one. So again, tying into that idea of really there's only one of us. We are single cells in a multicellular organism called life. The ancient teachings talked about the mystical body of Christ. My offering would be what they were talking about is the fact that although you and I, according to our senses, appear to be separate from each other, as Einstein said, that's an optical delusion. We're not separate from each other. And the healing process is one where we move out of this the mind that was called the mind of man, the multi-generational database with all of its foibles, and its inaccuracies, its griefs, pain. If we're living out of that, then we appear to be separate. There's a different mind rather than that database. We call the cycling of information in the mind in this culture, we call it thinking, but it really isn't thinking at all. You know, if I say don't think about the color of your car, what moves in you? What happens? Oh, well, I think something about my color of my car. Or some wise guy will say, well, I'm not thinking about it. Oh, really? What is it you're not thinking about? In order not to think about it, you had to. But and that definition of thinking, just cycling information in the mind, is an inaccurate definition of thinking. It's not thinking at all. It's just cycling information. Most people live in what they call the mind, which is nothing but cycling and recycling of information from the past. We're designed to live in what in the ancient teachings was called the mind of Christ. And that's not a religious idea. We're designed, it's our birthright to live out of the mind of conscious, active, present love. That's what you and I are designed for. And when we allowed that mind to be replaced by the mind of hostility or fear, that's when all the problems of humanity began. So that leads us into saying 24 out of this book of Thomas. And 24 is his disciples said, and you know, for those who maybe just joined us today, the book of Thomas is what we're working with, and the book of Thomas is not the a story type gospel as Mark, Luke, John, and such. It's simply a series of teachings or principles that Yeshua put forward. So the disciples say to Yeshua, teach us concerning the place where thou art, for it is necessary for us to seek after it. And he said to them, he that hath ears, let him hear. There is a light within a man of light, and it gives light to the whole world. If it does not give light, then there is darkness. So my offering is that what Yeshua was saying there is that the true essence of a human being is that of the active presence of love, or what was called light. You'll remember in another passage in the New Testament, he says, don't hide your light under a bushel basket. What is the bushel basket? It's the hostility, the fear, the rage, the guilt, the grief, the pain, the trauma and drama, and it's that blocks the light and restricts the darkness. So the disciples are looking for a place. It's interesting. I was talking to someone today, and they said, oh, you know, do you know where you're going to go when you die? It's like, well, I know what answer you're looking for, but I'm not planning on that. If I listen to the man that I fought, he said, if somebody tells you it's over there or over there or over there, believe them not, for it is here, it is now, it is within you. There is a light within you. And you need to do what it takes to get rid of the bushel basket so that you offer that light to all the world and allow that light to fall upon what you might call the just or the unjust. And then saying 25. And again, I do not have an Aramaic rendition, but I'm going to presume that the word love here, as it's used, is the same as when they said to Yeshua, what's most important in the law? the law being not the rule of a superior, but the way humanity works, what's most important? And he said, not love God, Creator, and as self. He said, have Rahma for the Creator, have Rahma for your neighbor, and by so doing you maintain yourself or your own human life. And Rahma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain. I mean, there's not even a word for this idea in the English language, in the Greek language, in the Latin language. There's no such concept. But Rahma is a filter and a gateway in the frontal lobes of the brain. Literally is the entryway for active present love into our human forms. So, saying 25, have Rahma for your brother as for yourself. In other words, when your brother is in your awareness, make sure that you have Rahma active in you. When your own state of being, your own soul is in awareness, make sure that that condition is set. And by so doing, you will keep him as the apple of your eye. In other words, even if your brother is somewhere way off in space, in dangerous places, you will be able to hold to the presence of light for him or her. Now, that doesn't mean that if in the culture someone's dangerous, though you hold them in light, it doesn't mean that you allow them to just run willy-nilly and do whatever they're doing to people. You can hold them accountable for their behavior, but the first order of business, if there's a situation where it's time for you to hold somebody accountable, is you make sure you're accountable, and you make sure that you have that active presence of light and love in you right from the beginning. Because what most people do who have cut themselves off from that light is they live in a state of blockage of truth. So saying 26 refers to that. He says, the mote which is in your brother's eye, you see that. In other words, you see the blockage of your brother, but the beam which is in your own eye, thou seest not. In essence, he's saying you're living in blockage of truth. When you point the finger at and you blame somebody else, then you're in blockage of truth. And whatever you're pointing the finger at somebody else for, and you're in a disturbed state, unable to stay connected to the light, that's your practice. That's what you need to deal with. And you go back and you listen to Paul, and he says, beware you who judge another. For that in which you judge another, you have been practicing. So he goes on in this saying 26 to say, when thou cast out the beam from your own eye, then will you see to cast out the mote from your brother's eye. In other words, do your work first. And then you're capable of being the space of active love for another. You're capable of supporting another in moving through their blockage of truth. Some of you might remember back in the early days of this work, if you were part of the early laws of living classes and such, we used to teach, and this was well, I won't say it was an error, but it's been upgraded significantly. We used to teach it as blockage of personal error. That was the original phrase out of the original emotional maturity instruction. Then when Dan McDougald and I put our work together and it became laws of living, there came a point of the recognition of, no, it's not blockage of personal error. It's blockage of truth. Everybody sees their error. I mean, you watch somebody who's in rage and they're blaming everybody else, and it's easy to see their error. They're fully aware of their error. They just call their error the truth. And when you fill, remember the Harvard research that says when in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. When one is in blockage of truth, and they fill that 9-bit space with an error, and they call, like, you're the problem in my life. Yes, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people, and I'm the only one that was here every time, but this is clearly your problem. That person is calling their error truth, i.e., the problem's out there, and now they're living not in blockage of personal error. They see their error, they just call their error the truth. So that was kind of an upgrade that came when we moved into laws of living. So when you end the blockage of truth in yourself, when you take responsibility for it and you heal all rage and guilt and grief, hostility, fear, sadness, rage in yourself, then the beam is gone from your own eye. And now, if your brother is in some state of blockage of truth, you're not in disturbance or upset. You're actually there holding to the active presence of love and can support them in moving through it. And so moving out of blockage of truth, recognizing that when we call our error truth, and there's an easy measuring stick to tell when you're in error, is the perceptual construct that your mind is giving you to any form of hostility or fear. If it is, then your mind is using corrupt data to generate whatever your perception is at this moment. And when you forgive as to that perceptual construct, then you'll be freed of your blockage of truth. You'll have cleaned up the beam in your own eye, and so now you're empowered to reach a hand out to someone else who's in blockage of truth and support them in opening to the truth. And when we tap into and touch the light in ourselves and each other, and we are continuously looking for the light in each other, then we become the transformers of our own lives and the lives of those around us. And that's what we're here to do with this work. So I'm delighted that you're with us. We've got just a few seconds left, so I'm just going to say thank you for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world, and we'll be back at it tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Appreciate you.